Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. And for tonight's episode, we're going to be tackling the Millennium Trilogy of movies. For those of you who have never heard of the Millennium Trilogy before, I don't blame you because, I'll be honest, I spend a lot of my time looking up movie trilogies to talk about for What to Watch Wednesdays. So if you don't spend your time exclusively doing a lot of that Googling, then you may not have heard of this trilogy before. But you may be familiar with the name of the first movie in our series. So I'll just kind of dive into the 3 movies on our watch list, and then I'll explain after the fact. How's that sound? Good? Let's do it. The first movie is going to be The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo from 2009, followed by The Girl Who Played with Fire from 2009, and closing out with The Girl Who Kicked the Hornets Nest from 2009. All 3 of these movies are from 2009. Don't worry, I'll explain it a little bit later. So, you may recognize the first title, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, as a movie made by David Lynch starring Daniel Craig. And let me clarify right off the bat, no, this is not a trilogy based around that movie by, did I say David Lynch? I meant David Fincher, excuse me. What I meant to say is, no, we are not talking about the David Fincher movie with Daniel Craig in it. We are talking about the series of Swedish movies that were based off of Stieg Larsson's books that were made in 2009, made into a trilogy of movies and also into a TV miniseries, which is why they all came out in 2009. They were able to be made into both a trilogy of movies and a little TV miniseries. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever end up watching the version with Daniel Craig after I watched all 3 of these movies because, to be completely honest, when I've been looking up trilogies of movies to talk about, this trilogy of movies often ends up on the lists of best trilogies of all time. The Millennium Trilogy is often considered a very good trilogy. And now, having seen them, I can't agree more. And we're going to get into exactly why that is after the break when we jump into The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So stick around for that. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo from 2009, available to watch on Amazon and Plex. For the basic plot summary of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a title that I will only refer to again this once, we follow Michael Blomkvist. Excuse me, these names are Swedish, so my pronunciation isn't going to be great. But nevertheless, we follow Michael Blomkvist, a journalist for the magazine Millennium, as he is contacted by a rich patriarch by the name of Henrik Wagner. And he is hired to find Harriet Wagner, who is the niece of Henrik Wagner. Get it? Okay, so Blomkvist is hired by Henrik to find Henrik's niece, Harriet, who has been missing for around 40 years, give or take. I think it's around 40, actually. It's around exactly 40 years that Harriet has been missing. So, Michael has a bit of a challenge ahead of him in finding Harriet, this niece, who's been missing for so very long. So he's going to have to do that. And in the background, okay. Before I get to the in the background part, let me just address the kind of basics here. If you are familiar with the David Fincher movie, then you may know what this plot is. For those of you who are not familiar with the David Fincher movie, let me explain this much. So that's the basic plot of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And you may notice that in that plot summary, I did mention a girl by the name of Harriet, but she's not the one with the dragon tattoo. So you may be asking, who's the girl with the dragon tattoo? What does that have to do with anything? And here's where we get to the interesting part. And here's where my critique, or more so my review of this movie really takes off, and where this trilogy as a whole really takes off. I've avoided it enough. Let's address the elephant in the room to anyone who's familiar with this story. So the main plot is Michael trying to find Harriet. In the background, Michael is being hacked and tailed and constantly kind of stalked in a way by this girl by the name of Lisbeth Salander, who is a computer hacker, and she kind of stumbles across Michael's files on Harriet and realizes that he's investigating her disappearance. And she, in the background, starts to follow along with Blomqvist's quest to find Harriet. Now, normally this is where it gets interesting when I talk about plot summaries, because that's a little bit too much more than I normally go into. But it's important, because here's the thing. Lisbeth, played by Noomi Rapace, is the selling point of this entire trilogy. I can't talk about the Millennium trilogy without mentioning Noomi Rapace as Lisbeth Salander. She is the face of these movies. She is the girl referenced in every title of these movies. She is the girl with the dragon tattoo, the girl who played with fire, the girl who kicked the hornet's nest. So just keep that in mind going forward. Everything I'm about to say about the movie's quality will indubitably, or whatever the word would be influenced by Lisbeth Salander. And the reason I may sound like I'm slowing down and being a bit vague and hard to follow right now is because she is such a complex character to explain, and she's not the main character of the first movie, and I'm trying to hold back until we get to the next two, where she becomes a much more prominent character and becomes kind of the central focus, because for the first movie, there's a lot of things that I noticed right off the bat that weren't even directly linked to Lisbeth Salander, such as the visual style of the girl with the dragon tattoo. My goodness, and I just broke my promise about not referencing the title again, whatever. My goodness, this movie looks so good, at least in my opinion, for 2009. I love the way this visual style just oozes that 2009 digital visual aesthetic, and I love the way when they're in the snowy mountains or snowy island that Henrik Wagner lives on. It just looks really nice to me. I really love it. I also like how competently done things like the soundtrack, the sound design, the editing, the cinematography itself, not just the digital aesthetic and the overall just look at the film, but the way the camera moves and the acting for Michael Blomqvist's character. I love a lot of these things about this movie. But again, I can't not mention Noomi Rapace as Lisbeth Salander. And especially in this first movie, she's the most interesting thing to talk about, and she's also the most difficult thing to talk about, because there are certain things that happen in this movie that I can't get into on the radio. So I'm going to put this out here right now. Lisbeth Salander's character suffers some very unfortunate things, some very adult topics that I cannot directly address. And because of that, this movie comes with a huge disclaimer. If you are not able to watch some of the things present in this movie, it's very understandable, and you should work within your own limits for it. That being said, if you are able to watch that kind of thing, and you have personal boundaries set in place like I do for that kind of a thing, and are able to sit through it, it more than pays off in the end. With the way this mystery unfolds, it's such a strange setup for this journalist to be contacted by this rich guy and be told, hey, can you find my niece? She's been missing for like 40 years. She disappeared off the face of the earth. I don't know where she is. And then randomly about halfway through the movie, he finds this hacker who's been constantly tailing him and been helping him kind of indirectly throughout the course of the movie. And she goes, yeah, I can help you find her. let's do this together now. And once she shows up, it gets even weirder because she's already been through some really tumultuous times, and now she's just helping Bloomquist. It's a weird emotional experience watching this movie for the first time and just kind of being asked to take it all in. I was sitting there just kind of soaking it all in and trying to process it and not doing a perfect job at it because it was just my first time watching it. What I can say confidently is I'll need to rewatch this movie and this trilogy as a whole, and I might even rewatch it in the form of that TV miniseries that came out where they took all three of these movies and just made it into a 6-episode TV show. That might be the way to go about it, because the way this emotionally complexified me is crazy, and complexify is not a real word, but that doesn't matter. What does matter is that the mystery at the core of the film that Bloomquist is trying to solve is very strange, very weird, and may not be the most logical in the world, but the way the reveals happen, I can promise you, is the very emotionally strange part for me. I didn't care that, logically speaking, none of it made a lick of sense. If I'm being completely honest, not a lot of it made a lick of sense, and it wasn't in that way of, oh, that's actually smart and kind of makes sense in context. If I'm being honest, in retrospect, not really. They just kind of reveal things to you, and you're left to just kind of sit in the reactions to it rather than how much sense it actually makes. And because of that, it's a weird movie to recommend, because if you're a fan of actually good mysteries, you may not be a huge fan of this. But if you're a fan of mystery movies that are also really emotionally weird thrillers like me, and you really enjoy seeing Lisbeth Salander, who is dressed like an emo all the time, and let me tell you, I really like the emo outfits, then it might be the kind of thing for you. And for me, it's really for me. I think that gets to the point of it. If it's not for you, that's very understandable, especially with some of the content warnings. And because of the way it's structured, it's not going to be for everyone. And I'm sure the Fincher movie is exactly the same way. From what I understand, it is. But if it is for you, it is for you. And let me tell you right now, I am obsessed with it. And part of that is because of how the second and third movies play out. But we do have to get to the second movie first, one thing at a time. So when we come back from the break, we'll jump into the second movie. Stick around for that. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What's Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at The Girl Who Played with Fire from 2009, available to watch now on Amazon and Plex. For the basic plot summary, we pick up a year after the events of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, where we follow Lisbeth Salander, who is accused of murdering one of Michael Bloomquist's co-workers, as well as this co-worker's girlfriend and her legal guardian. So now Michael Bloomquist must find a way to clear her name and make sure that she doesn't go to jail for committing murders that she actually didn't commit, because she's just framed for those murders. Now then, that's the basic plot of Girl Who Played with Fire. So here's the thing I need to address right off the bat, as I tend to do with sequels. Is it as good as the original? In my opinion, no, unfortunately. In comparison to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire is not exactly as good of a sequel as I would have wanted. Part of the reason for that, and it is going to sound really weird with how much I focused on it in the first movie, is that if I'm being fully transparent here, I think Lisbeth Salander got used a little too much in this movie. And I know I kind of hinted at her and then revealed her as this grand, big selling point of the overall trilogy when it came to the first movie. And that's because she is still the selling point. I just think the balance is a bit off in the second movie compared to the first movie. Because keep in mind, what made Elizabeth interesting is that in the background, her story is still happening, and then it becomes a part of the plot at a certain point where she then starts interacting more with Michael Bloomquist, and then it becomes them working together to solve the mystery eventually. With this, we are with her from the very beginning, and she becomes kind of the prominent character. And I'm not opposed to that because Lisbeth isn't interesting. I'm opposed to that because it's a different energy. It's a very different style. It lends it to a different kind of story than what the original was going for. Well, I keep saying the original. I have to keep saying the first movie because it's not the original. This isn't some hack-eyed sequel. This is a follow-up that was made in conjunction with the first, or at least I think is with the first. The point is that it's more of a direct sequel than you'd think it would be. It's not just thrown together. It's not made as a cash grab. It was made as an adaptation of a trilogy of novels, and it was later adapted into a TV miniseries. There's more connection here than most trilogies out there would have to their second movie when it's meant to capitalize on the original. No, this was made as a package deal, so I have to approach it from that perspective. And I gotta stop saying the original is what I'm getting at. So in comparison to the first movie, the second movie really tries to, I suppose, focus in on Lisbeth and her struggles and her character a little bit more and what that looks like. While it is interesting, I would argue that what made Lisbeth so interesting in the first film was her interactions with Michael Bloomquist. And it wasn't just interesting, it was really weird. And I liked how weird it got. And it was interesting emotionally to sit through that. Having it focus more exclusively on Lisbeth weirdly made it less interesting, less weird, and a little more sterile. And I wasn't expecting that from how out there and interesting the first film really was. I think part of the issue is that it takes a little while to get going. While I mentioned that plot summary of her being accused of murder and stuff like that, that takes a while to build up to. And it takes a while to build up to Bloomquist figuring out that A, she didn't commit the murders or that they even happened to begin with. And then him deciding to advocate for her, because we have to spend some time realizing why the coworker got murdered to begin with because of what he was trying to uncover. And it goes into this whole conspiracy thing that later gets fleshed out. But the point I'm trying to really get at is that it's still a decent movie, and it's still very well made. It did have a change up in directors, and that's understandable considering time constraints and considering it was made into a TV show. I think the thing I'm really trying to get at is that I'm so conflicted on how to feel about this movie because it's good, but it's not good in the same way the first movie was. It didn't hit the same level. It didn't hit the same strange occupancy in my mind. It didn't hit the same emotional levels as the first film. Excuse me. Again, I keep wanting to subconsciously say the original. So the first film. And because of that, it becomes somewhat difficult to recommend just the first two movies on their own. I will admit that the climax of the second film is pretty good. It gets to a certain point where it's thrilling and psychologically a bit strange and out there. There are still moments of it being a bit weird, and I kind of appreciate that. But no matter what, I think the second film will always remain this strange follow-up to the first film that had some growing pains to get through and didn't really know what it was trying to accomplish quite yet. But because of that, it is interesting to say that retrospectively, I do actually like the second film. This is why I'm conflicted, because I do like the second film a lot more after I watched the third movie. And I appreciate it more after watching the third movie. And because of that, all of those growing pains and all of that weirdness is solved by the third movie. And so because of that, after we get back from the break, we're going to dive into the third movie and what the third movie did to make me like the second movie. So because of that, stick around after the break where we jump to the third movie. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at The Girl Who Kicked the Hornets Nest from 2009, available to watch now on Amazon and Plex. For the basic plot summary of The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, we pick up immediately after the movie The Girl Who Played with Fire, as we follow Michael Bloomquist, who must now try and get Lisbeth Sandler acquitted from her court trial, where, again, she is accused of murdering people, and she is also being caught up in this grand government conspiracy that Bloomquist must scramble to solve. So, he has to go do that. Now then, let's address the basics of this movie. First of all, is it better than the second movie? In my opinion, I would say that this is better than the second movie. But I wouldn't just say it's quote-unquote better than the second movie. That's not the only thing I'd say about it. I would say that from my experience, my own personal take, this third movie, makes the second movie better. See, that was the whole reason I was so divided on the second movie, because originally, watching it on its own, I was like, it's kind of fine. It's in the middle for me. I'm not very strongly opinionated about it. I think it's a bit unrefined. Well, I was strongly opinionated. I thought it wasn't very refined. I thought it wasn't getting to the point. I was kind of lost with it. I was lost on how to feel, a bit confused. And then I watched the third movie, and I realized, hang on a second. I think they were going somewhere with it, and I think the third movie is really capitalizing on it. And I really appreciate that. So because of that, there's some things to just kind of address. I think the way the plot flows from the second movie into the third movie really works. It picks up pretty much immediately after the second movie and flows into its own thing. I really, really appreciate how, because of the way the second movie was structured, because it was a different director and just kind of a slightly different crew to my understanding, or at least a different director, just a different director, which is a change in crew. There was a bit of a change up in the visual style and the way they were edited together and the way it all looked and felt. It was very different from the first film. And so because of that, it was a bit distracting to see all the differences between the first and second film. In the third movie, they've toned it down quite a bit more, and it feels not as distracting to watch. You know, the best example I can give is that in the second movie, the camera moves a lot more than in the first movie. And it gets to a point where it's a little distracting because it's very elaborate movements that look really good and feel aesthetically pleasing, but don't exactly feel motivated or intentional or necessary. By the time the third movie rolls around, I'm watching it and I'm thinking, okay, a lot of this movement doesn't feel as distracting, doesn't feel unnecessary, it feels motivated, it feels interesting, it feels purposeful, and it isn't being overused to the point of it being distracting, and I really appreciate that. I will also say that a lot of the other details, such as, you know, the way the plot flows, the way new information is revealed, the way we're getting to the point, the balance in between Michael Bloomquist and Lisbeth Sandler. I almost called her Numi. I almost called her actress's name rather than the character's name, but whatever. The point is, the balance between Bloomquist and Lisbeth is struck a bit better, so we spend just as much time with both of them, and we don't exactly have as much interaction between the both of them, but it's understandable why. I think a lot of that is really appreciated, or at least on my end, it's appreciated. One thing that I found out about this movie during the breaks is that, critically speaking, this movie didn't do as good as the other two. And all I could think of was, why on earth did it not do as good as the other two? In my opinion, it may not be as good as the first movie, but it's better than the second one, and it made me appreciate the second movie better, especially in the way the last 40 minutes of this movie play out. Let me tell you, it may not be a grand mystery reveal, but the first movie didn't have a grand mystery reveal either. It did in a way, but it wasn't in a logical sense. It was in an emotional sense. And with the way the third movie plays out its emotional catharsis and gets to its points, I was left feeling ultimately very satisfied with where the story went. I thought it was very conclusive. I enjoyed it. I liked how it basically took a lot of my complaints about the second movie, such as the pacing and not exactly ramping up the stakes as fast, and maybe having too much of this and that, and not having enough of this. All of it was addressed in the third movie, and I thought it did a really good job of it. That's my own personal opinion, but I feel very strongly about it. I enjoyed the third movie quite a lot, in a way that I wasn't expecting to, but in a way that worked. And it looped back to both the first movie and the second movie in ways that counted and mattered, and ways that I understood. And because of that, the emotional catharsis by the end was really worth it. One thing that's still in my mind, because I've recently watched this third movie, out of all of these movies, of course, the third movie is likely going to be the one that I've watched the most recently. But one thing that's constantly in my mind now is the way this movie ended. I think it was the right way to end it. I felt that it satisfied something. We get something there that I just can't fully explain how weird and crazy and interesting and odd it all feels, and how tied in it felt to just how weird and out there and odd the first movie felt, with the structure of the second movie, but with it refined and polished to a degree that I really appreciated. I think you can tell I enjoyed this trilogy quite a bit. And again, it's a bit difficult with the first movie, but if you give it the time and you trust the process and you believe that these movies can be interesting and something worth exploring, and are fine with watching movies from 2009 that look like they're filmed on stuff from 2009, which I'm very okay with, I'd recommend this trilogy quite a bit. And because of that, it's really refreshing to talk about them, because for the past couple weeks, there's been kind of this trend I've been noticing with a lot of my episodes where I end up really wanting to recommend a first movie and not the other two, or maybe running into this problem where it's mediocrity all the way through. Because of that, I feel confident in ranting about Millennium Trilogy just a little bit more, because I was told it was one of the best trilogies out there. I was told it was a very good one to talk about. I was told it was a very good one to watch. And honestly, it hasn't let me down. I enjoyed it. I would say it's worth watching. It's worth experiencing. Because of all that, that's a good place to end the show. Thank you all for listening in to What to Watch Wednesdays tonight. I will be back next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg. Please be sure to follow along with What to Watch Wednesdays at What to Watch Wednesdays. All one word, no caps, no spaces on both Instagram and YouTube. And again, I'll be back next Wednesday telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.